In this video, we will trace every step from the 1930s right up to the present day to unravel one of the most enduring and disturbing mysteries on American soil, the story of Skinwalker Ranch. So buckle up as we delve into today's mystery. But first, you might find yourself incredibly lucky if you like and subscribe before the video ends. In the northeastern corner of Utah, where quiet mountain ranges cradle dry plains and sparse forests stretch endlessly toward the horizon, lies a region whispered about by locals for centuries. Unlike any other part of America, this rugged basin is known not only for its wild, untamed beauty, but also for the astonishing number of supernatural events reported within its boundaries. This is the Uinta Basin. From strange lights silently gliding through the night sky to bizarre beings that appear part human and part animal. From unexplained cold gusts emerging out of nowhere to rhythmic, mysterious sounds echoing beneath the earth. The Uinta Basin is a place where the mysterious blends seamlessly with the everyday. According to informal surveys, as many as 3/4 of local residents admit to witnessing things they simply cannot explain. For them, the strange is just a part of daily life. And if the Uinta Basin is a hot spot for the inexplicable, then Skinwalker Ranch is its very core. For decades, locals have spoken of this place using a name that conjures fear and ancient dread, Skinwalker Ranch, because it is believed to be cursed by beings known as skinwalkers. These are malevolent shapeshifters from Navajo legend, said to assume the forms of animals in order to stalk and harass humans. Legend holds that after an ancient conflict, the Navajo cast a curse on this land in vengeance against the Ute tribe. Since that time, the Ute have believed they must never set foot on Skinwalker Ranch, as it sits directly in the path of the Skinwalker, a portal between realms, where shadowy entities are thought to move freely between dimensions. In the spring of 1994, Terry and Gwen Sherman signed papers to buy a ranch deep within this remote part of the Uinta Basin, unaware that they were stepping into a nightmare beyond anything they could imagine. To them, this 480-acre property was a dream, a place to raise cattle, build a life, and enjoy peaceful rural living. But within hours of moving in, that dream began to unravel in a way no one could have foreseen. On their very first day, while they were still unloading their belongings, a massive creature appeared at the southern edge of the field and slowly made its way toward them. At first glance, it resembled a wolf, but as it approached, Terry saw that it was nearly 3 times larger than any wolf he had ever encountered. It moved slowly, its deep blue eyes seeming to pierce directly into one's mind. Strangely, the animal showed no signs of hostility. In fact, it even allowed Terry's father to pet its thick, damp fur without resistance. But just moments later, the calm turned to chaos. In a sudden, lightning-quick motion, the creature lunged and bit down on the head of a young calf peeking out from its pen, trying to drag it away. Terry, stunned by the sight, grabbed a club and struck the beast, then fired multiple rounds from his .357 Magnum at close range. Shockingly, the bullets seemed to have no effect. Finally, after switching to a high-powered rifle and firing several more times, the creature slowly backed off. It left behind a strip of flesh that reeked of decay, as if it had been dead for days. In the weeks that followed, the Sherman family found themselves surrounded by strange phenomena for which they were completely unprepared. Gwen began to notice that everyday items, from groceries to personal possessions, would vanish, only to reappear in bizarre places. One day, she stepped out of the bathroom for only a few minutes. When she returned, her towel and toothbrush were gone. Hours later, they turned up in strange places, like the center of the staircase or tucked away inside a bedroom closet. At first, Gwen questioned her own memory. But after Terry misplaced a 70-pound soil probe and later discovered it lodged high up in a tree, over 60 feet tall, both he and Gwen were forced to acknowledge that something or someone was playing games with them. The longer they stayed on the property, the more mysterious occurrences unfolded. At night, flickering lights would float along the northern fence line. Glowing objects moved silently across the sky. Mechanical sounds, with no clear origin, echoed from deep underground. Their cattle began disappearing without reason. Some were found afterward, but not intact. However, the event that finally shattered Terry's patience was the gruesome death of the family's 3 faithful hunting dogs. One evening, a blue orb, about the size of a tennis ball and emitting a sharp, high-pitched sound, appeared near the edge of the forest. The dogs immediately ran after it. Believing it to be harmless, Terry allowed them to go. But the next morning, he and his son discovered only 3 charred piles of flesh, still faintly smoking in the grass. After more than a year under constant stress and invisible attacks, the Sherman family was on the edge of collapse. They had lost over a dozen head of cattle, representing tens of thousands of dollars in losses. But more significantly, they had lost their sense of peace. Their children's grades at school began to slip. Gwen lost her job at the bank due to frequent absences caused by exhaustion. Eventually, the entire family began sleeping in one room, since the strange activity never ceased surrounding them. By 1996, as the weight of these events pushed the Sherman family to their limit, a man named Robert Bigelow stepped into the picture. An American billionaire with a long-standing interest in unexplained phenomena that science hadn't yet explained, came from a young Ute boy named Roland McCook. In 1981, while out hunting near the mesa close to the ranch, Roland and a friend sought refuge from a sudden rainstorm inside an old, abandoned Bigelow came across a news article about Skinwalker Ranch. It compelled him to buy the entire property and initiate a formal investigation. Bigelow founded a dedicated research group named NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science. This team included scientists with doctorates in physics, biology, psychology, veterinary medicine, and even former military operatives. These individuals weren't inclined towards superstition. On the contrary, they were chosen specifically for their analytical mindset and their pursuit of rational scientific answers. From the moment they arrived at the ranch, the NIDS team launched an extensive series of experiments. They collected samples of soil, air, and water. They recorded everything from electromagnetic fields to infrasound and magnetic anomalies. Observation towers were built. Infrared cameras were installed. Around-the-clock video monitoring was initiated. Their goal was to uncover the cause behind the strange experiences the Shermans had reported. What they found, however, would shake even the most skeptical members of their team. One of the most astonishing incidents involved the sudden disappearance of 4 of Terry's large bulls from a locked pen. The gate was still fastened and showed no signs of tampering. After a frantic search lasting several hours, the bulls were discovered, somehow crammed inside an old trailer container. That container's door hadn't been opened in years and was coated in thick cobwebs. No one could determine how the animals had ended up inside. On a different night, researchers witnessed a strange light floating above a field. Using infrared binoculars, they observed what seemed to be a portal opening in midair. From inside it, a dark, faceless entity emerged, crawling and slithering across the ground, as if it were surveying the area. But that wasn't the only. Unusual visuals weren't the only phenomenon. The team also reported hearing strange subterranean sounds, detecting strong musky odors, and encountering zones where the magnetic field shifted abruptly. On many occasions, they saw triangular-shaped crafts drifting silently across the sky. These unidentified objects seemed to be aware of the researchers' presence and appeared to avoid the cameras with uncanny accuracy. Their advanced equipment often failed at crucial times, and the strangest occurrences consistently unfolded just beyond the reach of their surveillance systems. After months of careful monitoring and data gathering, the scientists had to confront a deeply troubling reality. Something unquestionably strange was happening at Skinwalker Ranch. And whatever that presence was, it clearly did not want to be exposed. The ranch's previous owners, Kenneth and Edith Myers, had lived there for nearly 6 decades, but never once did they publicly mention anything unusual about the property. However, according to neighbors, close acquaintances, and past ranch workers, the true story may have been far more complex. One of the earliest disturbing accounts dates back to the winter of 1948. As night fell and a heavy snowstorm began covering the land, Kenneth Myers heard a knock at the door. When he stepped outside, he saw a man standing about 10 feet away, dressed in a long black coat and wearing a wide-brimmed hat. The stranger claimed he was from the sheriff's department and was just checking in to ensure the family's safety during the storm. But when Myers turned to invite him in for coffee, the man had completely vanished. The only evidence of his presence, footprints in the snow, led to the front gate and stopped there. Myers stood silently in the swirling fog, shut the door, and muttered, "Dear God, this land is cursed." But that encounter was only one part of a much broader pattern of strange experiences the Myers family endured quietly. In 1975, a young ranch worker named Jimmy Spears disappeared while fixing a fence along the far boundary of the property. 3 days later, he was found in a terrified state with no memory of the missing time. Jimmy remembered working in the early afternoon, then abruptly waking up 3 days later in a trance-like state behind an abandoned house on the ranch. He soon left the property, haunted by recurring nightmares in which he was buried alive beneath the floorboards of that same deserted building, a dream that played out night after night, as though it were reliving a real event. Another bizarre case involved two young women from the Myers family. Around 11 p.m., while driving back toward the ranch, they noticed flashing red and blue lights behind them, what appeared to be a police car in pursuit. But the very next thing they remembered was daylight. They found themselves sitting inside their vehicle, which was now parked on top of a mesa, a flat rock formation with no road leading to it and entirely unreachable by a standard car. It took a full 6 hours and specialized towing equipment to retrieve the vehicle. Neither woman could recall how they had ended up there. Even local authorities weren't immune to the ranch's strange phenomena. A former deputy sheriff named Chris Porritt, who had often responded to the Myers calls regarding missing livestock, once discovered 2 dead cattle near the main house. The animals had been dissected with extraordinary precision. Their reproductive organs had been removed and carefully stacked in a neat pile behind the bodies. Not far from the carcasses, Porritt saw a 23-foot-long depression in the grass, a shape that perfectly resembled what a cigar-shaped flying object might leave upon landing. In a separate incident, 3 calves vanished without leaving any trace. After an exhaustive day-long search, they were found sealed inside a small storage shed. The animals remained unresponsive until someone doused them with cold water. Only then did they abruptly come back to life, snapping out of whatever state they had been in. The door to the shed had been firmly latched, sealed tight beneath a blanket of cobwebs, and no one could offer a clear explanation as cabin. Strange sounds soon reached their ears, followed by the unmistakable sight of fresh, human-like footprints etched in the snow. From within the shadows, a towering creature, nearly 8 feet in height, emerged. It had the body of a man but the head of a wolf, and it growled menacingly at them. The boys, terrified, discharged their rifles in fear, prompting the creature to flee into the woods. However, Roland later revealed that from that night onward, he began hearing scratching at his windows and faint growls echoing just outside his home. More than 40 years have since gone by, and still, he insists the nightmares have never left him. As tales from Skinwalker Ranch began to reach far beyond the Uinta Basin, the initial reaction from many was skepticism. It had to be a hoax, they thought. A popular theory emerged suggesting that the Sherman family had concocted the entire narrative to inflate the property's value and escape a failing investment. After all, they had lost numerous cattle and faced severe financial hardship. Perhaps this was a clever ruse to attract a potential buyer. But this theory quickly crumbled under the sheer volume of independent eyewitness testimonies describing events that defied all logic. Moreover, supernatural accounts in the region long predate the Shermans' time on the property. Legends of the Skinwalker have existed for generations among the local indigenous tribes. These communities believe the land was cursed after a violent conflict involving the Ute people, and that dark supernatural beings, born of forbidden magic, have haunted the area ever since, their presence passed down through time. Still, not even ancient lore could explain everything. The intelligent orbs of light, the mysterious aerial craft glowing in the night sky, and the sudden disappearances often marked by signs of instant teleportation. These occurrences seem to go beyond the bounds of cultural mythology. Thus emerged a bolder theory. What if the government was using Skinwalker Ranch as a secret testing ground for classified technology? Terry Sherman himself had once suspected such a possibility, wondering whether he and his family had unwittingly become subjects of a covert experiment. When Robert Bigelow pulled out of Skinwalker Ranch in 2016, many assumed the curtain had finally dropped on the mystery surrounding the land. But the truth was quite the opposite. Nearly a decade of in-depth investigation by the NIDS team had yielded no definitive conclusions, and the strange phenomena continued unabated. One theory, however, has begun gaining serious attention within the scientific community. Perhaps Skinwalker Ranch isn't an isolated case. Across the world, from the deep reaches of the Amazon rainforest to the barren stretches of Siberia, from the Andes Mountains of Peru to the remote plateaus of Tibet, there have been accounts of similar locations. These are areas where time, space, and human consciousness seem to warp under the influence of some mysterious force or intelligence. Researchers have begun calling these areas reality leak zones, locations where the dimensional fabric of reality might be stretched, overlapped, or even infiltrated by an alternate form of existence. Skinwalker Ranch, it appears, could be just one among many. If today's story sparked something in you or reminded you of similar strange tales, feel free to share your experiences in the comments below. And if you're interested in exploring more of the world's unresolved mysteries, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We'll see you in the next video.